This is Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, broadcasting live from the Fixing America Command Center in Fort Collins, Colorado, here is your host, Steve Laffey.
Hey, good afternoon, United States of America. Good afternoon, America. It's a great day. We're happy to be here with you. This is an important day for the show, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. It's important because we're taking on foreign policy. You know, you can follow us on Facebook, Laffey Radio. We're LaffeyRadio.com. It's streaming live right now. But, of course, we put these shows up right afterwards. So, you know, we broadcast at 3 o'clock Monday through Friday, all of our important shows, but they immediately go up into the sky. And if it's 5 o'clock Eastern time or 10 o'clock at night, and you say, I want to listen to what Laffey had to say, you just plug it in. Come on to LaffeyRadio.com. We've gotten an awful lot of people to like us. It's still growing. We appreciate that. We send out these Twitter stuff, and we tweet all the time. We've got the Laffey Minute comes out every day. Pass that around to your friends. Get on our website and just pass that around. Once a week, we come out with a Fixing America Presents, a little more upscale, done in a green room we got to get to you. And that's something you can pass around. Occasionally, we do something on a bigger way. But I've been troubled. This is something for me. I'm really the financial expert. So when we talk about finances on the show and we talk about Social Security, balance and budgets, that's my lifetime. I haven't spent a lifetime in foreign service for the country. I've been watching it, been trying to study it for years and years and years, and I'm just very troubled. And I think you should be too. I'm troubled because when you get to the question of foreign policy, and of course you have to ask yourself, what is a foreign policy? What is our foreign policy? What's the United States of America's foreign policy? What does foreign policy mean? Well, it means different things to different people. But basically, it's a strategy. It's a comprehensive strategy. How are we going to deal with other countries? What are they going to know about us? That's a fact that they can take to the bank, both our allies and our enemies. What do they know about America? What should they know about America? What did they know about America? And what can they count on for the future? Both, again, enemies, allies, and all those countries in between that can't decide. And how do we get more of them to be our allies in a way that, for the most part, we don't have to lose any lives for our brave soldiers, men and women? Lost far too many. So as you look at our foreign policy, I go back to the very beginning and ask ourselves, do we have one? Do we need one? Henry Kissinger wrote a book just around, just came out a couple of days, I think, before September 11, 2001. And the name of the book, Does America Need a Foreign Policy? The book is, yes, we do. It wasn't like Henry Kissinger after all these years. I'm not saying he did a great job. It's not a question of that. He could have done a much better job. We all could have done a much better job. And that's the thing about our foreign policy for years. Let's take it from the end of World War II. We could have done a much better job. But by and large, up until Barack Obama became president, at least we had a foreign policy. I'm not saying it was the correct one. George Bush made many mistakes in foreign policy, and we'll go through that. But we don't seem to have one now. And so there's an article written, this is a long time ago, this article. I usually start with something that's pretty recent. But back in May of 2013, this is out of this is Brett Stevens who writes. He's writing about this article, this book about Henry Kissinger. But it really goes through the fact that we really probably don't have a foreign policy. And this is before the Syria and the chemical weapons and so forth. But it doesn't matter because since 2008, we haven't really had a foreign policy. And of course, some people in our country are growing the growing isolation movement. The Ron Paul represents that wing of the isolation movement. Many of the progressive liberals represent what we call the isolation movement. There are all sorts of views, he writes. Isolationist is the only real word for them that crowd in his inbox every week, and they're not fringe group. There's a growing number of Americans, conservatives too, that have concluded that the lesson of the last decade George Bush and Barack Obama, is that since the U.S. can't do it all, the wisest, most moral, and most self-serving interest is to do nothing. And that is a growing movement in America, and it has to stop. I mean, America is a country that, since it's been the world superpower, has been the most benign one. Now, you can go on Facebook and dispute it. It's really not, it's nothing, Rome was not a benign superpower. They were the world superpower a long, long time ago. England, with its colonies, subjugating the people there, it's not a benign superpower. Neither was France. We have been. We don't really try to colonize. We've made a lot of mistakes going to Guatemala in the 50s. You can talk about Vietnam. You can talk about a lot of things. But we always had a foreign policy until Barack Obama became president. Right or wrong, it was a foreign policy. It was something that people could count on. So you look at it, he writes, let's face it, America in the age of Obama does not have a foreign policy. This is a good way to put it. It has foreign policy impulses and a foreign policy apparatus. We got CIA agents. We've got people stationed, military around the world. We've got the Seventh Fleet, so forth. We've got embassies. We've got a big apparatus. We spy, they spy, we spy on everybody, which bobs along on waves and currents of events. We haven't capsized yet. We assume it can go on this for a long time. One of the paradoxes of our supposedly hyper-connected world is how easily we still pretend that the rest of the world is far, far away, and it's not. All of our problems have gotten worse in foreign policy, and they're affecting America in a great way. The Benghazi fiasco he talks about. And here's the end of the article. Elsewhere in the world, most countries suffer because they remember too much too well. America alone, it seems, suffers the opposite affliction. We remember little and remember it poorly. Does America need a foreign policy? The question seems odd only because not many people besides Henry Kissinger can recall that the U.S. has attempted to do without one before. And recall also how the previous attempt ended in September of 1939. Talking about Nazi Germany. America really didn't have much of a foreign policy in the 1930s. And we paid a giant price for it. And the world paid a giant price for it. And it'd be my contention, and we can argue about this, that without a foreign policy, we are likely to head, time going forward, to some kind of chaotic world where when people don't know how they're supposed to behave and they don't know the repercussions, if they behave in a poor manner, you find a lot more people with ill manners. It doesn't matter whether it's your children or foreign countries. Everybody's got to know their place. And we are the world superpower. And I am not an isolationist. However, can we cut the military spending? We've done shows on that. We can cut the military spending. We can cut it $200 billion and have an effective fighting force. But we've got to have a strategy. So let's take a look at the countries first that are against us and why they're against us. Who are the countries? What is their strategy? Before we go to our strategy, what's really going on? It seems as though we've got, and I thank Bill Martell, I should say, a friend of mine, for a lot of the information I get on foreign policy. Great guy over at Tufts University. But when we think about it, there seems to be about 6 countries that are uniting against America. You've got China, you've got Russia. No, stop, I said China. Most people, they think we're friendly with them. They're not. They're really our enemy. Now, it doesn't mean when we say enemy, it doesn't mean to be at a war with them. We have to understand that they have a different way of life. They're communist China. You've got Russia with Putin. You've got Iran. You've got North Korea. You've got Syria. You've got Venezuela. These 6 countries have a lot in common. What are they? They hate us. They hate our way of life. They're authoritarian. They want to keep all their people down. So they look at us as the big giant. And they want to bring us down, but they can't do it one at a time. They can't do it all at once. So they unite together. here and there, and they're always united together. I mean, when North Korea sends off a missile, look back and see who's standing around. It's someone from Russia, someone from China. And China strategy will just be like, oh, they shouldn't do that. We'll cut back on them. And they never do. They love North Korea being the crazy uncle in the room, disrupting U.S. foreign policy, seeing how much they can get away with, to see how much China can get away with. So that's one of the things they have in common. They actually hate freedom. That would ruin their power. Freedom would ruin their country. Freedom, they know. They've watched autocratic rulers go down. They've seen what happened in Iraq. They've seen what happened in Libya. So they watch the stuff. They don't want it to happen to them. So if they act separately, they're weaker. But if they act in unison, always defending each other against the West, against especially America, we're the West. Our freedom risks their power. And just if we do well, which we're not doing well, if we do well economically, that hurts them. People want to be in America. They look to America. They are 6 countries, when you look at it, that want to take America down. Now, what are some of the other characteristics that they have? 1, they fear transparency. They fear democratic institutions. Okay. They fear that. They will impose any burden they can on their own people. I mean, we all know about North Korea. They starve their people. Syria, they use chemical weapons on their own people. Iran, if you're protesting Iran, they're likely just to shoot you down. Not rubber bullets, they just shoot you down. So they will do anything. China, I've said in one show before, maybe it's been 2 shows, they beat blind people. I mean, Chen, the guy who finally got to America, they suppress everything. Now China has a different strategy in some respects. They look at America and say, oh, everything's fine. We're working on that. We're going to have another meeting about that. We're going to have our 3rd plenum. We're going to open it up. They never do. Russia, of course, jails anybody they want. Anybody either makes too much money, who thinks they're going to get away with it, makes one simple statement about democracy, they're just put in jail. Some sham trial. So that's what's really going on. And we never talk about it that way. Look at the news today. Do we ever talk about these countries uniting together against us? And that's our problem. We always talked about it with the Soviet Union. It was us against the Soviet Union and the policy of containment. That was a strategy. In fact, that's still, I guess, in some ways, the U.S. strategy. It died a long time ago when the Soviet Union died. We really can't contain them in a way that we used to think about. We're not sitting there saying, oh, if you go across that bridge, in North Korea, we're going to move you back to a certain point. That's containment. Oh, in Vietnam, we're going to stop you from going so far. We're only going to bomb up these sort of places because we're not trying to take the whole thing back in some respects. We're just trying to contain. And in some ways, because containment was based upon the mutual assured destruction, which we still have. But containment we need another strategy. And I don't know if we can sum it up in one word anymore because it's gotten quite complicated. All these economies, by the way, are terrible, except for China. And we've done shows on China why theirs is better. It's better because we help them be better. But as a policy, and we'll get into the strategy of what we got to do, we can't have China being a strong, vibrant communist country based upon them taking advantage of our workforce and putting us out of jail. That can't be a strategy. But except for that, the other 5 countries are basket cases. I mean, how many people really know? You look at Russia with the strength of Putin recently. People in America must think it's a vibrant country. The country is this economic size is like the size of Italy. It's losing population. It'll go down like 50 million people in the next 30 years. It's only kept alive by oil. Another strategy we don't have, a strategy to lower the world price of oil. Who would really be hurt by it? Most of our enemies. Would China benefit? Yeah, of course. They would be hurt by our changing a trading strategy. But Iran, oil at $50 a barrel, you'll see the riots in the streets. Russia, out of business. They're out of business anyway. I mean, they really can't make it anyway. With oil at $100 a barrel, they can't make it. Half of these three countries we're talking about get most of their dollars from oil. And of course, Russia gets it from oil and what? Selling arms to these other countries. So there's another thing that we need to know. They have shared principles. Here's what they're going to do. And we have to know this before we have our own strategy. These countries are always against the USA. In the United Nations, China and Russia are permanent members. So they always vote against us. They always stop everything we're trying to do. It's in their interest to do so. They use any means in the United Nations. They always claim to support any rules and then not obey them. They support each other no matter what. That's truly what they do. They support each other no matter what. And we're going to get into that. But we need a general discussion about who they are and what they do. They oppose democracy in their own country and in any country. Of course, they threaten and sometimes invade their neighbors. And look at what Russia did in Georgia in 2008. And look at the threats they've made now when we dropped our interceptor missiles we were going to put in Poland. And we'll talk about that. But now it's getting worse. Look at the lack of respect. When Putin went around the country, or around the world, he made a pointed effort to visit many other countries before he came to visit America. He was trying to show America you're not that important. And he's a guy on the stage with all the weaknesses. Yet now he's on the national stage where other countries are looking, well, that guy gets things done. Even though it's a really, I would call it a bad bluff for him. Because he's not a really strong country, except for the nuclear weapons. It's a weak country. But he's a nationalist, a true nationalist. He wants Russia back to the days of Peter the Great. And that's why he'll go on national TV, diving down below the ocean. They'll plant some gold bars, and he'll find them. Take off his shirt, run around, do the judo. I mean, he's a true nationalist. He wants Russia for Russians. And the Russian people, unfortunately, still, this goes back thousands of years, go back to the czars. They view him now almost as a czar, many people. If only the czar knew was a famous phrase. He'd take care of me. But Russia's not a strong country, except we let it be strong because we have a bad strategy. What does Russia really do? They have military sales among these countries. Recently, Russia engines power China's stealth fighter. China buys ultra-quiet Kilo-class submarines from Russia. So they're trading back and forth. Who's the biggest arms sales person or country to Syria? That would be Russia. All these things is where they get their strength. Of course, Venezuela's getting into deals with China, oil for guns and so forth. So now we're identifying the problem. We have to have a president that goes out and talks about this. We have countries that really don't like us. They don't like us at all. So we can't have a strategy. We can't have a strategy that favors them uniting, that looks to them to unite, that's happy for them to unite. We've got to have a strategy that divvies them up, makes it difficult for them. In fact, we've got a clip. Let's play clip 2. And it's a very short clip, but I want you to hear Hillary Clinton in 2012 talking the opposite of what should be the U.S. strategy. If you could play clip 2, boys. Well, I don't know. No one can hear clip 2. I must be doing something wrong here. But Hillary Clinton talks about wanting the Russian and Chinese people to unite to help in Syria, that the country should be uniting. They shouldn't be uniting. We should have them dividing. And there's ways we can do that. Well, anyway, we're going to take a short break here. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We've analyzed what their strategy is, what our enemies try to do, who they actually are. Not that we can't always get along with some of them in different situations. We can't. But why they're acting together. They need to act together because we're so strong. And we're playing into that game by allowing them to unite and not even talking about it and trading with China in the way that we do to make them as strong as humanly possible so they can help out these other countries. Anyway, we'll be right back. It's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're at Laffey Radio. Be back in a couple of minutes.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages. Laffey owns guns, lots of them. But what will taking them away from him accomplish? What will banning the ones he already has do to reduce gun violence in America? Tune in to Steve Laffey's Fixing America this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as he dives into one of the country's biggest hot buttons. The facts surrounding gun violence may actually surprise you, but Laffey's solutions going forward should not. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America.
This year, firefighters like Fire Chief James Hall will battle wildfires around the country in hopes of containing them. But firefighters can't do it alone.
A single ember that escapes from a wildfire can travel more than a mile, or it can ignite and destroy your home and community.
Get fire adapted. Learn simple steps you can take now to reduce wildfire damage later at fireadapted.org. A public service message brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service and the Ad Council. Learn more at fireadapted.org.
I am an American soldier.
I'm a warrior and a member of a team.
I serve the people of the United States and live the Army values.
I will always place this first.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never accept defeat.
I will never quit.
I will never leave a fallen comrade.
I am disciplined.
I am disciplined.
Physically and mentally tough.
Trained and proficient in my warrior tasks and drills.
I'm an expert and I'm a professional.
I stand ready to deploy, engage, and destroy the
enemies of the United States of America in close combat.
I am a guardian of freedom and the American way of life.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
I am an American soldier.
There's strong, and there's Army strong. See what it takes at GoArmy.com.
This is Nnamdi Asamoah. I play football for the Philadelphia Eagles, but what I do off the field with United Way might be more important. I'm a volunteer tutor and mentor. Why? Because over 1 million kids a year drop out of school, and that's not okay. It takes 12 years to create a graduate, but it takes about the same time to create a dropout. And the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be me, or it could be you. Studies show that if we get to these kids earlier, their chances are better. And kids who read well by 3rd grade are more likely to graduate. So join me in United Way. Suit up and take the pledge. Become a volunteer reader, tutor, or mentor. Because when a child succeeds, we all succeed. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge at unitedway.org. Brought to you by United Way, the Ad Council, and the National Football League.
And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
A top story, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin agreed to step up efforts to prevent any military action against Syria. In a telephone conversations, the two presidents stressed that any use of military force against another country without a UN mandate is a blatant violation of international law. Putin and Rouhani agreed that any use of chemical weapons is unacceptable and emphasized that the Syrian crisis must be resolved only through diplomatic means. Meanwhile, commander of Iran's Islamic Revolution Guards Corps, Mohammad Ali Jafari, is warning that the US will face another Vietnam if it attacks Syria.
Well, there you have it. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're here talking about foreign policy, and there's a clip of Putin and Rouhani, the relatively new guy in charge in Iran. They're banding together, just like we talk about. They band together, whether it's China and Russia banding together in the UN, these guys are banding to prevent an attack on Syria. We go into the religious reasons for it, for Iran, the Sunni Shia thing, but they're going to band together all the time. And of course, then you throw in the thing about it's another Vietnam. If we would actually have attacked, from the air, Syria, we would have another Vietnam. It's almost like these guys are writing press releases, and they just know that the news is just going to play it just that way. They're just going to play it, and as if there would ever be another Vietnam in a country the size with the amount of people of Syria. There would never be. But they just throw it out there, and then they throw out other clips too, like it'll be the death of Israel. I'm surprised that there must be one of the clips we missed. There's clips all the time with the guy from Iran just whip stuff out there. And they only want a peaceful resolution. They don't want to violate any international laws. Of course, these two countries violate them all the time, So when you get into why these countries are together, it's not, here we are here. We're looking at, here's Syria's allies. We talk about Syria a little bit and how Russia, Iran, and China are standing by the regime. And they will continue to do so. Nothing will change about this. Russia cares. Russia sells arms to Syria. Ideology. Russia's key policy goal, get this. This is out of CNN. Even CNN recognizes this. Russia's key policy goal is blocking American efforts to shape the region. That's their policy. So we've got to keep them apart, and yet all we do is really try to put them together. Our foreign policy, here's Hillary. Let's try this again, boss, if we can. It's clip 2, Hillary Clinton in 2012. She wants Russia and China to work together to help us. They're not helping us. Play clip 2, please. Yeah, there's no clip there. I won't try that till after the next break. So there's no clip of that, but that's what Hillary Clinton's talking about. Here's Iran. Iran and Syria bound by 2 factors, it says. Religion and strategy. Religion. Iran's the most popular Shiite Muslim nation. The Syrian government is dominated by a Shiite offshoot. And the rebels are Sunnis. Strategy. For Iran, Syria is also a strategically key ally. It's Iran's main conduit. How do you think they get to Hezbollah in Lebanon? They go through Syria. That's the proxy which Iran can threaten Israel with an arsenal of short-range missiles. That's what's going on. China's relationship with Syria is more nuanced because they forget the part about these guys all going together. Beijing's renewed interest in Damascus, the traditional terminus node of the ancient Silk Road. China sees Syria as an important trading hub. No, that's really not. It's not an important trading hub for China. China's much bigger than Syria. They see it because they need Russia and they need Iran and they need to buttress American power. That's what they want to do. They want to walk around and say, we get things done. And because just recently, there's another very important factor going on. It's one of the reasons that Saudi Arabia, the largest exporter of oil and the big swing producer still, in many respects, even though they're less powerful than they used to be, it's one of the reasons that they're moving away from America. Not the main reason, because it's our lack of strategy, but China just became the biggest importer of foreign oil by about 100,000 barrels a day over the United States of America as their economy grows. So they got that wrong. But most of the stuff they got right. That's why these guys stick together. So what's next? We've talked a little bit about the death of containment, but we need a strategy. We're going to need a strategy about what we need to do. What are we going to do? What's the American strategy in foreign policy? What is our strategy to deal with other countries? And then we can look at the last 4 or 5 years and say, have we done any of this? One, and this comes from a lot of my different readings, but one of them has to be that we've got to call them out on what they are doing all the time. The U.S. government cannot have a state dinner for China and introduce him and shake his hand when they oppress human rights, when they are working actively against us, and when they are building all kinds of military operations to threaten us, to threaten the free world. That's actually what's happening. It never gets reported. And it never gets reported, well, because the average, I could go on all, there's not conspiracy theories, but it really doesn't get reported because of the lobbying effort of multinational giant American companies that are doing so well because of their labor in China. Now, China's got massive problems, but we're not being transparent. Of course, when we meet with them, and you can look back to the dinner that Barack Obama had in it was 2012, I guess, when the new premier came in and they entertained him and wined and dined him. But we're not calling people out on what they're doing all the time, on human rights violations. We used to do it all the time. We don't do it anymore. We also got to emphasize what we do well as a country. We have to emphasize around the world our freedoms. We've really become stagnant on this. The America is the land of opportunity. Sure, we've got to get our immigration problems straightened out. Sure, we've got lots of problems. But we are still the beacon of light for people who yearn to live free. You know, we are the exceptional country. But our foreign policy has gotten to the point, totally spun out of control, that here it is right here, that Putin in Russia, this is back, a while back, September of 2013, where he writes an op-ed in the New York Times lecturing America, one bald-faced lie after another. How the New York Times even thought to print this. Even the New York Times, I don't think, in 1979 would have printed this. From a communist dictator with just one bald-faced lies. The United Nations founders understood that decisions affecting war and peace should happen only by consensus. And with America's consent, the veto by Security Council permanent members was enshrined in the United Nations Charter. The profound wisdom of this underpinned the stability of international relations for decades. One, we hadn't had international relations that have been stable for decades. Two, it was a giant mistake to allow Russia and China to have permanent status on there. Giant mistake. I mean, the United Nations should be a country for free countries. We had to redo the United Nations, not get rid of it, redo it. It basically becomes a place for countries that hate us. You must remember when Hugo Chavez, before he died, came in and called the President of America a pig. Called George Bush a pig in front of the 100 and some odd countries. We did nothing. Now, I know he had diplomatic immunity. He never should have been allowed. It's crazy. That's not the United Nations. That's not what it stands for. Here it goes. He talks about all this stuff here, but what he gets to at the end of this article, this is how bad our foreign policy has gotten, that he's talking about American exceptionalism. My working and personal relationship with President Obama is marked by growing trust. Bald-faced lie. I appreciate this. I carefully studied his address to the nation on Tuesday. This is back in September of 2013. I would rather disagree with the case he made on American exceptionalism, stating that the United States policy of what is, quote, what makes America different, it's what makes us exceptional. Neither one of these people understand American exceptionalism. He says it's extremely dangerous to encourage people to see themselves as exceptional, whatever the motivation. Then he goes on and he asks for the Lord's blessings. I mean, bald-face out of bald-face. Here's a man who's a thug, jails people, wants to let us not forget that God created us equal. We know in America that God created us equal. Fine, Mr. Putin. American exceptionalism came about because we were the exception. We were the exception how we started our country, where the people came first, the government came last. That was the exception. It's not perfection. It's just the exception. That's what it's about. It's not about that we're better, but we are the exception for people who yearn to live free. So we've got to engage them all the time. Where was the response to this op-ed piece by the President of the United States? Where was the flat-out calling? And that's why, by the way, we have a country with the President, not the Congress, not the members of the Senate, not our governors. He's not unique in the role in that he has help, but it is a strong foreign policy country where the President of the United States has a great ability to affect foreign policy just by who he visits, just by who he lets come into the country. And we'll go over the failed strategies of the failed lack of strategy. But we've got to make China weak. If indeed I'm right. And these countries that we've talked about, Russia, Iran, Venezuela, to a lesser degree, now that Chavez is gone, but Maduro is still there and he's still the same ilk. He's still getting the stuff from China. Syria, and other people view them as being very, very strong. Look what's happened with Putin, getting very strong. Well, if they view it that way, we're getting weaker. Foreign policy is a zero-sum game. Russia gets stronger, we get weaker. And the perception of what people are going to do, how they're going to act. And we want them to know how to act. So we got to make China weaker. That's our trade policy. China might come around. If people were rioting in the streets, all those guys, very little women, no jobs, they might come around. They're not going to come around with the strategy that we have today. And we got to make the others weak. That's another strategy. The other strategy, this is where George Bush was so off. We've got to have a strategy where we make them spend their hard-earned treasure and we don't. Let's go back to Poland, 2009. Barack Obama becomes president. We are supposed to put interceptor missiles in Poland. And if you look at, by the way, all these countries, it's all, we can do a whole show on this in every country about geography. It's all geopolitics, where people are located. We are the most blessed country. We've got these two giant oceans on each side, friendly neighbor and great friend of ours, Canada to the north, and pretty friendly neighbor to our south, Mexico, relatively speaking, what it could be. So we've got a situation that we're blessed. Poland is not of all the countries in the world. But if you just go out throughout history and you just watch back and forth, people are marching. They're marching back and forth into Russia. Russia's marching back and forth. That's why Russia wants Poland. That's why they want the Ukraine. They gave this stuff up when they disintegrated for a while. You know, when the wall finally came down, they disintegrated, and we got 100 million people to live free, and we've got to strengthen that. But Putin wants help from everybody around him who are enemies of America. He wants strength there. So in 2009, what did we do? We did not put the interceptor missiles in Poland. And Czechoslovakia was involved, as I remember. They were going to have the radar there. So we had two countries that we were going to put in. By the way, just recently, the other country that's right near, look at the map again. Look at the Ukraine. They had this orange revolution, 2004. It's kind of fallen away. And Russia, because of its growing strength and growing more because of what's happening in Syria, which we've allowed them to take over foreign policy of America. It's absolutely bizarre. So we've got to find a way to do the opposite of what's happened to us since 2000. Effectively, we've spent $1 trillion+ more than our enemies have had to spend in our wars and getting bogged down in Iraq and Afghanistan. And we should have learned that was not a good foreign strategy. Go in. Yes, go in. I always agreed with going in. Of course, I was the first person, I think, to call for Rumsfeld's resignation. It was on national TV. I was a candidate for the Senate. He just done a terrible job. Rumsfeld, Secretary of Defense under Bush. So that's got to be a strategy where we get together and say, how do we make them spend their money when we don't? We're the leader. Act like one. By the way, here's another strategy that we're not taking seriously at all. Engage the other freedom-loving countries to step up to the plate. The biggest example is Japan and Abe, the new leader. He wants us to step up. He knows, by the way, South Korea knows too. South Korea is developing its military even more and its Navy even more. They know China's a giant threat and they're a lot closer. But they want us to step up and help them and acknowledge that. We should be acknowledging with those little bits of islands that Japan and China are fighting over. Not fighting physically, but fighting in wars of words about which ones they're going to be called. It's like battlefields in the Civil War. The North still calls them a different name than the South. Over there, there's a bunch of little islands. We've got to side decisively with Japan. We've got to tell Japan, we welcome you to remilitarize your... It's been a long time since World War II, folks. We welcome you. By the way, that's them spending their money that we're not. Build up their military. Thwart China. Tell South Korea the same thing. They're our friends. Build them up. By the way, we do nothing. Take a look at the map with India. Do nothing. You never hear about India. They want to be our friend. Seems like we're trying to be friends with Pakistan. They're never going to be our friend. But India will be our friend. So these are all strategies, but they have to be, overt. We got to say them. We've got to go visit and have great relationships with Japan and India and South Korea to buttress this stuff that's going on with China. And recognize again that this is something that's been happening for a long time. And we need a positive message. We can't be about stopping Syria all the time. We need a positive message to the world. Radio Free Europe. We need to be broadcasting in these great things happening in America. The problem is not a lot of great things happen in America, and we've got to change that. So we'll be back with more strategy for a foreign policy after we take a break, it's Steve Laffey. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're at LaffeyRadio.com. Like us on Facebook at Laffey Radio. Go to Twitter. We're at Laffey Radio. Check out some of our videos out there. The Laffey Minute. Fixing America Presents. Spread them around. It's starting to spread. We like it. But we've got to have a good foreign policy. We'll finish up with a continuation of our foreign policy and the disasters of the recent administration's failed foreign policy. Steve Laffey's Fixing America. Be right back.
Stay tuned. Steve Laffey's Fixing America returns after these commercial messages.
Go Caleb! Come on, hit a homer, Jesse!
Let's go, guys!
Hey, did you guys know that kids who play sports earn more money when they grow up?
Of course. I knew that.
Hey, did you guys know that kids who read books have a bigger vocabulary?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Wow, Jinx. Did you guys know that friendly children have more friends?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hey,
that's true. I knew that. Did you guys know that winter babies are better at music?
Everyone knows that.
Oh, yeah?
It's pretty obvious.
Yeah.
So obvious.
Oh, hey, guys, did you know that most people think they're using the right car seat for their kid, but they're not?
Huh. I didn't know that.
I'm pretty sure I knew that.
I'm pretty sure you didn't.
Parents who really know it all know for sure that their child is in the right car seat at the right age and size. Visit safercar.gov/the right seat to make sure your child is protected. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
No one is better suited and more prepared to guard America in the century ahead than the U.S. Air Force. Above all, we defend America. Above all, we defend freedom. Above all, we are warriors who dominate air, space, and cyberspace. Above all, we are brothers and sisters who proudly stand together.
Right. But orange is what we have now.
Above all,
so when I
we ensure victory before the battle even begins.
Yeah.
Above all, there is nothing our friends respect more and our enemies fear more than the power of the U.S. Air Force. Above all, we stand ready as the decisive force for the 21st century. Above all, we are the U.S. Air Force.
Thank you. Okay. I'll try the other one. Everything else okay? Okay.
Driving has a rhythm all its own. Don't wreck it with a text. Before you get behind the wheel, silence your phone. Or better yet, designate a texter. For more text-free driving tips, visit stoptextstoprex.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration.
Laffey owns guns, lots of them. But what will taking them away from him accomplish? What will banning the ones he already has do to reduce gun violence in America? Tune in to Steve Laffey's Fixing America this Friday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time as he dives into one of the country's biggest hot buttons. The facts surrounding gun violence may actually surprise you, but Laffey's solutions going forward should not. Only on Steve Laffey's Fixing America. And now, back to the Fixing America radio program with your host, Steve Laffey.
Governor, the problem is that on a whole range of issues, whether it's the Middle East, whether it's Afghanistan, whether it's Iraq, whether it's now Iran, you've been all over the map. I mean, I'm pleased that you now are endorsing our policy of applying diplomatic pressure and potentially having bilateral discussions with the Iranians to end their nuclear program. But just a few years ago, you said that's something you'd never do. In the same way that you initially opposed a timetable in Afghanistan. Now you're for it, although it depends. In the same way that you say you would have ended the war in Iraq, but recently gave a speech saying that we should have 20,000 more folks in there.
Wow, that's that's 2012, and that's Barack Obama running against Mitt Romney, and that's him talking to him during a debate. And he's telling him, quote unquote, you've been all over the map. And it's obviously been us that's been all over the map. It's Steve Laffey back, Steve Laffey's Fixing America. We're We're talking about foreign policy and the lack thereof of America's foreign policy, how we get one back, and how we understand what a good foreign policy is. We talked about a lot of different issues. We got some more to talk about. Let's continue. One of the things that people have to understand about a great foreign policy is that we have to be strong at home. You know, our infrastructure is crumbling in America. Our bridges, our roads. They were going to try to. They told us back. This is Barack Obama again. A lack of a foreign policy, lack of a domestic policy. We're going to fix our roads with this $800 trillion spending program. We hadn't fixed any of them, to my knowledge. Our inland waterways are crumbling. From New Orleans all the way up, we have its infrastructure. We've moved stuff around on barges, but a strong, healthy country with a great infrastructure, with Wi-Fi, with all these kind of things that people can communicate. That's a great foreign policy. That's what we've got to do. We've got to have a great foreign policy, you know, and we need to have a positive message. You know, we've always got to defend human rights. And by the way, we've got to get back to using our allies the way we should. We've got to re-engage with Britain and France. You know, and listen, there are extremists on all this stuff. You know, you've got in the policy of containment that we've had. We've got the Rand Paul crowd that thinks that Iran they'll be wonderful if we just leave them alone. They will not. It's an evil structure, but we've had an opportunity. Let's go through, you know, some of these policy failures that we've had. We've had an enormous amount of policy failures. In fact, I'll play a clip right now. Let's play clip 3, boss. This is Lindsey Graham talking about our lack of foreign policy. Lindsey Graham, the senator from South Carolina. Go ahead, boss.
See the Nobel Peace Prize for not being somebody else. 4 years later, almost, after the Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded, where do we stand as a nation? In case you haven't heard, bin Laden's dead. That's good. That's a great accomplishment. The president should take pride in that. We should all celebrate the death of that evil man. But that's not a foreign policy. Is anybody deterred from attacking America's interest in the Mideast because bin Laden's dead? Has anybody said, I better not go over the wall of the embassy in Egypt, you know, we killed bin Laden?
No, the answer is nobody is saying that's a foreign policy. And Lindsey Graham, I disagree with on a lot of things. But this is a discussion of what is not a foreign policy. The death of bin Laden is simply not a foreign policy. It was a military operation. And we talk about lack of success in foreign policy, the fact that we don't really have one. I mean, again, foreign policy, a strategy of dealing with other countries. I think it's time to go through and look through some of our foreign policy failures. We talked about what it takes to have a good foreign policy. Let's go back to the very beginning. How about when I talked about a great foreign policy is strengthening our allies, people who have been with us for a long time. And these sound like small things, and people might be saying, oh, what are you talking about, Steve Laffey? There was a bust of Winston Churchill that Great Britain gave us on loan, worth a lot of money. Winston Churchill, considered one of the greatest statesmen, took Great Britain through the war, one of their great heroes, a real wartime leader, worked with our leaders over here to defeat Nazi Germany. The bust of Winston Churchill, they said to Obama, just keep it. You have to give it back right now, just keep it. He sent it back. The reaction in London, and I've been there like 50 times, my friends in London, the reaction was like, what? People were ticked off. And that's one of the things that starts to loosen our relationships. I mean, this is going on. How about in 2010, another great ally of ours, Israel? Netanyahu comes to the White House. He basically stays in the back. Obama says, I want you to stop and freeze all these settlements right now. He said, I can't do that. Obama leaves him and goes out to eat dinner. Leaves him sitting there. Again, one of our great allies mistreated. These things should never happen. And they've been happening ever since Barack Obama got into office. We had a state dinner for China, Communist China, in June of 2011, a real gala. They had these great platitudes and talked to each other. Never should have a state dinner for China. Should we meet with the foreign leader of China? Sure. Not a state dinner. A state dinner implies you guys are with us. They're not with us. Another signal sent that you can do terrible things to your own people. Have a state dinner with the President of the United States. The message to the other countries is, oh my gosh. I guess we don't have to behave. They don't have to behave. They get great trade deals. Let me go through all that. How about the speech he gave in June of 2009, the New Beginning speech in Cairo? How'd that work out for everybody? It was weakness. It was weakness. Why did he have to go over there and give a speech? The extremist Muslims in that country and most of the Muslims in that country just simply hate America. Some pretend they don't, but they do. Some we have to use for our own benefits, like Saudi Arabia. Back in the when we first went into the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, we strategically needed them. Turkey was too far away. Take a look at the map. All this stuff is geopolitics. We needed them. Now look at what's happening. Iran, 2009. People forget this. People were rising up. You can listen to Hillary Clinton talk about, again, another failed Hillary Clinton policy. They were afraid to do anything. After the fraudulent presidential election, people were rising up. We should have been out there. We should have had the CIA helping us there. They're in that country. Should have helped the uprising any way we could have thought of. Instead, they thought it might turn around. This is all not true. It might turn around that we started the uprising. We, the U.S. We didn't do anything. And people were shot. People were murdered. Everybody went, oh my gosh, we're not getting any help from America. Another failed foreign policy. Russia, 2012 election. Obama whispers to Dmitry Medvedev, just wait till after the election. Talking about, in fact, let me read you the transcript. This is how President Obama thinks. He whispers, on all these issues, but particularly missile defense, this can be solved, but it's important for him to give me space. Medvedev says, yeah, I understand your message about space for you. Obama says, whispering again, this is my last election. After the election, I have more flexibility. Medvedev says, I understand. I will transmit this to Vladimir Putin. I mean, we've had people who didn't know the mics were on say things. I mean, Reagan joked, the bombings will start now, as I remember. And he got caught, oh, holy heck for that. At least it let Russia know that he was a serious guy. This lets them know we're a weak guy. And the growth of Putin has been incredible. But there's been more. Look at Snowden. This kid, Snowden, he steals our military, steals the secrets, he publicizes them, and he flees to China and Russia. We decide we're not going to meet with him at the G20 event. The top 20 economies of the world get together. We're not going to meet with Putin. And then within a month and a half, I think about it. We've said, whether right or wrong, and I think it was probably wrong, if it used chemical weapons, we're going to come in. Don't cross that red line. And then we allow, through a series of events you've all read about, where the vice president makes a misstatement and Putin jumps on it. Putin jumps on it and says, okay, we'll get rid of those chemical weapons, which are not going to get rid of the chemical weapons. Some of these chemical weapons are in the middle of a warfare. We won't know where they are. But look at the rise in the big bluff. The bluff that Putin plays, like a master card player. He's got nothing in his hand. He's got some nuclear weapons. He's got a declining population, a terrible workforce, lots of oil that he can't even figure out how to get out of the ground because he's still got a statist economy. He's losing everywhere. The country's disintegrated. We've built up a freedom around him through the Ukraine and Poland and other countries that are now living free. And he just comes right back. Here he is. He's back. And then look at Benghazi. In fact, we've got a clip. What clip is that? We've got to play the mashup of Benghazi. Clip 1. Would you play? Benghazi's unbelievable. It's an unbelievable foreign policy gaffe. But play clip 1 of the mashup, boss, please.
I said we go after Al-Qaeda and bin Laden. We did.
I was pretty certain and continue to be pretty certain that there are going to be bumps in the road.
These protests were in reaction to a video.
Over an awful internet video
that sparked by this hateful video.
Protests that rose because of the outrage over the video.
And when I look at what's happening in Libya, there's a big song and dance about whether this was a terrorist attack or a protest. And you just want to scream, for God's sake. Are you kidding me?
I don't know. They haven't told me anything. They're still studying it. And the things that they are telling me are just outright lies.
And today, Al-Qaeda is on its heels, and Osama bin Laden is no more.
We've decimated Al-Qaeda Central.
I told him, please don't give me any baloney that comes through with this political stuff. I don't want political stuff. You can keep your political. Just tell me the truth. What happened?
That's a difficult clip. That's the mother interspersed with Vice President Biden, Susan Rice, President of the United States. And there's two things that stand out there. The mother just wants the truth, but the things that really for foreign policy. One of the things about a foreign policy that everybody has known about America, we don't leave anybody behind. We're coming after you right away. We're going to come get our people. Forget about what was going on in Benghazi for a second. Forget about it wasn't really an embassy. Obviously, something else was going on in that country. There wasn't an embassy. It wasn't a protected embassy. Forget about Hillary Clinton for a second, making a total gaffe of even having people over there in a not a secure place. Never, ever should someone have allowed that. She should have resigned over it. And they lied about the video. They even arrested a guy in California about this. But a foreign policy, so people know where we stand, it was we never leave people behind. We always come and get them. Violated. Now they think next time they won't even come get the people. We can do whatever we want. That's how it negatively affects us in our foreign policy. These things have happened over and over and over again. Look at the overthrow of the military overthrow of Morsi, where the military actually went in. This is in Egypt, a while back, and said we can't have this guy, this extremist Muslim. You can't have him anymore. We warned him. And the military really runs the country anyway. It's been running it since Nasser, right, in the 50s. And so we can't even call it a coup because I guess we still want to give him foreign aid. It obviously was a coup. We can't even use the right terminology to either condemn it or endorse it. We don't have any strategy. So the question comes down to, a lot of times it comes down to, is this a foreign policy failure for Obama? Or is it a success? Some people think it's a success. Here's one guy who thinks, he calls it Obama's successful foreign failure. The president may look incompetent in Syria, but his behavior fits his strategy to weaken America abroad. So it gets down to maybe Barack Obama's strategy is simply that. He's going to weaken America abroad. The article's gone about all the things that Barack Obama has done. It says the key to understanding what Mr. Obama has pulled off is the astonishing statement he made in the week before he was elected president. Quote, "We are 5 days from fundamentally transforming the United States of America," end quote. But foreign policy was another matter. He talks about all the things he's done domestically. As a left-wing radical, Mr. Obama believed that the United States had almost always been retrograde and a destructive force in world affairs. So he camouflages his retreats from responsibilities bred by foreign entanglements as a new form of engagement. He camouflages what he's doing. And for the fulfillment of his dearest political wishes to make America weaker, Mr. Obama is evidently willing to pay the price of a sullied reputation. And so this is much worse than the 70s. He talks about maybe we'll have someone who replaces him, like Reagan replaced Jimmy Carter. But Jimmy Carter was no Barack Obama. He had a strategy. He didn't execute well. It's terrible, some of the things he came up with. He didn't have a strategy that was executed well. But a man who worked for the Naval Academy, he had a strategy. Well, anyway, we got to wrap up. We've gone through specific things we've got to do here for foreign policy. We've talked about the failed foreign policy here in America. We've got to drill down in other shows about specific things. But in order to fix America, we have to have a successful, long-standing, and understood foreign policy that enhances America's interest in the world and makes people know that when we say we're going to do something, we will do so. We will not leave people behind. We will improve our infrastructure. And we know which countries are against us, and we'll talk about it all the time. We'll be back with another show. Thanks for listening. Steve Laffey's Fixing America, signing out. Check us out tomorrow. God bless.
You've been listening to Steve Laffey's Fixing America radio program on the Laffey Radio Network. Fixing America is broadcast Monday through Friday afternoons at 3 p.m. right here at www.laffeyradio.com. Any rebroadcast, retransmission, or account of this broadcast without the express written consent of Laffey Network, LLC is prohibited.